Welcome to Aging on the Suncoast. I'm your host, Jason Martina. The U.S. Department of Justice reports that 1 in 10 seniors, age 60 and over, will experience some form of abuse. Even more startling is that these abuses are underreported. Unfortunately, seniors who are victims of abuse are more likely to be institutionalized or hospitalized than those who have not been abused. This month's show does not have a warm and fuzzy theme. However, we'll benefit from the information shared today. We're fortunate to have with us Sherry Clester, the Victim Advocate Program Manager with the Area Agency on Aging of Pasco and Pinellas Counties, and John Palumbo, the Operations Program Administrator with the Florida Department of Children and Families. Sherry, John, welcome to Aging on the Suncoast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, like I said before, the topic today is not a warm and fuzzy one, but you two possess a lot of knowledge which will help our consumer base and our audience really understand what the differences are between abuse and exploitation and neglect, how to possibly report those too. So, John, you've been working with the Department of Children and Families for such a long time. How does the state of Florida define what abuse is?
Well, Jason, the state defines abuse or elder abuse is the willful act or threatened harm to a vulnerable adult. And we define a vulnerable adult as an individual who's 18 years of age, who's unable to provide for their care and protection, or whose abilities to perform their activities of daily living are not, there's some impairment to that activities of daily living through a physical, emotional, or the infirmities of aging.
Yeah, that's definitely sounds like a vulnerable adult, and those people should be looked at highly. Not neglect. Neglect is a term that we use a lot, and how's that term neglect really related to the term abuse?
Well, neglect is kind of a subset of abuse, and it's the caregiver who has, through either a willful act or intention, who neglects the individual. It's really and truly what we look at as the omission on the part of a caregiver of a vulnerable adult to provide care, supervision, or services necessary for them to maintain their lifestyle, maintain their life.
Yeah, unfortunately, these things happen nowadays, and I'm so happy that you two are at the forefront of trying to educate people to understand how they can avoid these situations, but just as importantly, how to report those. So there's different types of abuses that are out there. Sherry, do you mind telling us what types of abuses are out there?
Sure. There are several types of abuse. Some of the more prevalent types of abuse, there is physical, that's the first one. With physical abuse, some of the telltale signs or red flags, you may call them, may be red marks, bruises, contusions. A lot of times these things are unexplained, or there's an inadequate explanation for them having these bruises or marks. Contusions, like I said, it can also be broken bones, fractures. Let's say an elderly person, their glasses were broken and they also have a black eye. They may say, oh, well, I fell down the stairs. And this can happen time and time again, but if it happens often, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, is this what is really happening? Sometimes we need to ask them further questions, or you would report it if you think that abuse is happening. So physical abuse is one of the first signs, one of the categories of abuse. Also, sometimes elder victims, they will report themselves saying that they are being abused. They may tell a close family member or friend, let them know that they are being physically abused. So we need to take that serious. And we need to not sweep that under the rug. If they are telling you these things, take it seriously, and we will need to report those things. Also, caregivers sometimes refuse visitors when somebody's being physically abused because they do not want anybody to see the marks or bruises or the slap mark, these type of things that the elder is dealing with or the victim is dealing with. So that is one of the signs, or a couple of the signs for physical abuse. Another category would be emotional abuse. Some elders suffer from emotional abuse. Let's say a caregiver is in the home. They're constantly calling them names or saying degrading or demeaning things to the elder. That's emotional abuse right there. Some of the telltale signs or red flags for emotional abuse, they can sometimes be that the elder is being isolated. They're not allowed to leave the home. Or again, People, visitors, family, friends are not allowed to come to the home because they don't want these people to recognize that they are being emotionally abused. And sometimes visitors or family or friends will recognize that it's happening because the elder will be removed from normal activities. They are no longer going to their neighbor's house and having that cup of coffee, or they are no longer doing the things that they used to do. A lot of times with emotional abuse, the elder sometimes becomes depressed or sad, upset. Maybe they're crying for no reason. So those are some red flags for emotional abuse.
They're all very sad.
They are sad.
It's horrible to hear that. And,
it is, and sometimes emotional abuse is the hardest one to identify, because if you're not in the home, you're not hearing the things that are being said to the elder. So, and there's one other one that is very prevalent, and that is financial exploitation or financial abuse of an elder. Sometimes with financial abuse, some of the signs you can notice is change in banking information. Let's say somebody were to take a credit card out in the elder person's name, or the caregiver's living in the home with the elder, and the elder is reporting to this family or friend that they're no longer receiving their bank statements. That's a huge red flag, only because maybe that person that's in the home, the caregiver, they are maybe stealing checks from the checkbook. They are signing their names, on the check to go cash out money. So these are some red flags for financial abuse. I think the only other one that is important to mention is that sometimes there's unpaid bills, and we know that these elders can afford the bills, such as the power bill, the light bill, the water bill. If collections agencies are calling the home for unpaid bills, that's a big red flag if the elder in the past could always afford those things.
Yeah. That may go against their normal personality of keeping up with bills, and definitely a big flag. All that sounds so horrible.
It is.
And John, obviously you've had some experience in that world. Is there anything to add to some of the?
I mean, one of the things that you'll see a lot of are children who move into the home, and now they have no job, they have nothing going on, yet they're maintaining their lifestyle. They're usually they might utilize the elders' funds to support themselves. Somebody who has digressed to a point where they really should be in a facility, in a nursing home, and the children won't let them go or won't put them in there, yet at home they're not getting the care they need. We'll go in, we'll find a home where some of the instances that we've had is we've gone into homes and you'll find somebody who just is in horrid condition. She's maybe has bruises, or she's sitting in the same clothes, and I mean, we've had to really literally pull somebody out of a chair where they had to cut the chair out to take her to the hospital because they were not taking care of her, just to keep her in the home because they needed that check. What about my check? They almost look at it as mom's check is their check now. I mean, that's one of the, unemployment is one of those things that is one of the characteristics of abusers.
Again, it just sounds so horrible, but obviously it's something that you all deal with every day, and it's something that we should talk about, and we should not be afraid to talk about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can talk more about it. So we covered the different types of abuse and some of the red flags that that would kind of signify maybe what type of abuse is actually occurring there. We haven't actually talked about the perpetrators of this abuse too. Are there common characteristics that we can talk about so we would understand that a little bit better? Sherry, do you mind?
Sure, there are. Some common characteristics are that, well, research has actually shown that about 90% of the perpetrators or abusers are actually family members. So this is the son or the daughter that becomes the caretaker in the home. That's very alarming that it's family that's doing this to people. And sometimes the reason why it becomes family is because they are the ones that are close to the elder. They want to help take care of the elder. However, they may not know or be adequately prepared to take care of the elder. They don't know the exact needs that they have. And so sometimes this causes stress. The family members become stressed out due to this. They may lash out. So with the stress of, this is my family member and I don't really know what they need, they sometimes lash out. They may become physically abusive, and you would never think that a family member would do that to somebody. Also, with characteristics of abusers, sometimes it can be an institutional employee, such as an ALF, somebody from there. They can get stressed out as well, or, for whatever reason they become physically abusive or emotionally abusive, start calling them names, those type of things. A lot of abusers, sometimes they have substance abuse issues where they will abuse drugs or alcohol. And the issue with this is, let's say you have a caregiver go into the home and they have a substance abuse problem. Well, if they start taking money or taking checks from the elderly person, they are using that to fuel their substance abuse issue, and it seems to just stem from there. It gets worse, I should say. And the only other thing that I can think of is that sometimes the family member that comes in the home, they already have a poor financial situation. So they are not doing well themselves, kind of like what you said earlier. And so they will use the elders' funds to basically live themselves or abuse their money,
And another facet is retribution. The individual may have been abused by the parent.
Right.
Child abuse is prevalent, and it's a lot of times we'll see that the child will just kind of take back what they have already had when they were abused as a child. Now mom is in a condition where she's in need, and they kind of get some retribution on what happened to them in the past. It really kind of is one of the characteristics is, I think, it's a cycle.
It is.
Yeah, I never even thought about that.
And in institutional settings, sometimes you might have somebody who was a child who was abused, who never dealt with their trauma that they had as a child being abused, and they might start abusing the elderly in an institutional setting. So.
Okay.
Those are some of the characteristics.
Yeah, John, for somebody, we were having a chat prior to taping this today, and I heard you talk about a statistic that was there. So what is the prevalence of people that are abused?
I mean, the prevalence, there's estimates of the prevalence, and I have to take from my notes because otherwise I forget. No. More than half suffer from psychological abuse, including verbal assaults, threats, fear, or isolation. Psychological abuse is generally considered to be the most common of all forms of abuse, and at least half of all elder adults suffer from financial abuse, such as theft or misuse of their property and finances. And in some instances, there's that fine line, because it may be somebody who fully is aware of everything that's going on, and they have capacity, they have an understanding, executive reasoning is there, but they kind of allow someone else, their child or something, to take care of everything for them.
Yeah.
And they don't want to report it sometimes. That's the problem, is a lot of it goes unreported because they're not unwilling to allow their child to go to jail or something like that.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because from what I understand, that a lot of victims do not report abuse against them, and/or someone that knows somebody that's being abused does not report that as well. Is that a fair statement to say?
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, they're reluctant to report the abuse because fear of retaliation. They don't want that child to go to jail, or they don't want to have to go into a nursing home or a facility, that they want to stay in their home.
Yeah.
That's pretty much a lot of our elders that are abused. That is one of the things that they're looking for.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks very much. We have a short amount of time, and so I wanted to let the audience know, thanks for joining us and for the first segment of our show, and please stay tuned, because we're going to take a small break where we'll be back with a lot more valuable information for you.
Elder abuse is always devastating, but it may not always be obvious. Isolation, coercion, and the withholding of medication are only a few of the more subtle forms of elder abuse that occur every day to thousands of our senior citizens. Please join me in the fight to end elder abuse. Our elders deserve better. Visit the website of the National Center on Elder Abuse. It's time to speak up.
During the first segment of today's show, we talked about elder abuse, what to look for, and how to report it. During the second half of the show, we bring back Sherry Klester from the Area Agency on Aging and John Palumbo from the Department of Children and Families. Let's examine elder exploitation and the resources available to the community. John, Sherry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So John, you have a lot of experience with the Department of Children and Families and obviously work with a lot of different definitions that accompany some of the things that we're talking about today. How does the state of Florida define what exploitation is?
The state of Florida defines exploitation as a person who stands in a position of trust and confidence and knowingly obtains or uses or endeavors to obtain intent to temporarily or permanently deprive a vulnerable adult of the use, benefit, or possession of funds, assets, or property for the benefit of someone other than that vulnerable adult. And the other portion of the statute is they know that the vulnerable adult lacks the capacity to consent, has no executive reasoning, understanding, and then they do the same that we had stated. Exploitation may include breaches of fiduciary relationships, such as misuse of power of attorney, guardianship, joint assets in common, unauthorized taking of personal assets, misappropriation, misuse, or transfer of monies belonging to a vulnerable adult from a personal or joint account, or intentional or negligent failure to effectively use a vulnerable adult's income and assets for the necessities required for that person. So basically, exploitation is taking an individual's assets and utilizing them for some other purpose other than what they would intend it for their use.
Yeah, what a comprehensive definition. It really seems all-encompassing on there. Sherry, you've unfortunately had experience probably working in this area too. What types of exploitation are out there?
Sure. Some examples of financial exploitation are cashing an elder's check without their consent. So like I said before, they can take the check, forge the signature, and cash it. Or maybe they're getting a Social Security check. They may take that check and go cash it at the bank without the elder person knowing. Also, sometimes the caregivers will forge signatures on financial documents or wills or power of attorney, those type of things that deal with finances and money. Sometimes the caregiver can coerce or deceive an elder into signing other things, other contracts. There's also a lot of scams out there right now where criminals will pose as like an electric company or a water company, come into their home, get them to go to a different room while somebody else comes in, and they will steal the elder's belongings or, things like that.
Yeah, that's, again, horrible. We talked about how horrible things were when we talked about abuse, and it's just the same, in my opinion, for when it comes to exploitation. Red flags, are there any kind of telltale signs that somebody could be looking for these different types of exploitation that occur?
Sure. A lot of times it's lack of necessities that the elders sometimes can afford certain things, food, their bills being paid, and for some reason those things are not available to them anymore. Sudden changes in banking. Let's say the caregiver adds their name to the banking account of the elder person, and for some reason you're noticing big withdrawals, or the caregiver is now getting large sums of money, those type of things. Another red flag is, like I said, the unpaid bills. Collectors start calling the house, and this is something that is very unusual.
Yeah, I can see that. If the person is not acting in the normal fashion that
Correct.
they do, there's sort of small flags and sometimes large flags of what to take a look at in there as well. So when we during the first segment, we talked about abuse, and we gave the audience, I think, a pretty good description of what that is, and we talked about a little bit of neglect, and then we talked a lot about exploitation on here. So there's some very important things that I think we should also understand is how do we actually report these types of instances in the community? Is there one number someone can call, or is there many things that people can do?
Well, in the state of Florida, we have one hotline, and it is 1-800-96-ABUSE. It handles both adult and child abuse. It's staffed 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day, and those individuals who are there will ask and ascertain information from the person who's calling in to get the name, the location of the individual, what they suspect is going on, so long as we have a means to locate, an abuse report will be accepted. They'll determine, does the person meet statutory requirements, say, as a vulnerable adult, because if there are certain things that are not met, they may not accept the report. They may just send it through as a notice to the our receiving unit to say, this has come in, but it's not an exploitation report, and so maybe a services counselor might go out and talk to the individual about it. As far as I was going to give you all the number, which is 1-800-962-2873. So keep it handy. And we also have an online presence. If you go to myfloridafamilies.com, you can find a portal which will do an automatic, you can basically type it in on the web, so you don't have to go through the call center.
Nice for our folks that are a little bit more computer and internet savvy out there as well. And thanks for saying the number out loud. And I believe for our audience, we're going to have that number posted as a graphic on here. So so keep your pens and paper handy so you can write that down a little bit too. Now, Sherry, obviously, if you are a witness to abuse or exploitation, or even if you are actually the person that is unfortunately experiencing the abuse or the exploitation, that's the number that you want to call on there too. But does everybody have the right to call that number, or is
Yep, in the state of Florida, everyone is a mandated reporter.
Oh.
So if you know about the abuse or you suspect abuse, you need to make that phone call.
Okay.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts. If you think you know, you need to report. And that's why the investigators are there. They are the ones to investigate. You do not need to be the one going out and doing your own investigation. There's professionals for that, and they will conduct a thorough investigation.
Yeah, and I imagine if you're unsure, that it is that erring on the side of caution is always going to be the best measure. In
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's best to report. I mean, even if you don't know the name, the full name, their age, whatever, we can take a report on just, and I'll give you an example of a report we had recently.
Please.
Where it came in as unknown, which is what the name of the victim was, but it said their address. It gave us a location of the individual. We were able to go to that address, start talking to basically the alleged perpetrator who was there, wouldn't let us into the home, so we were able to contact law enforcement and found exactly what the individual reporting it had done. And people who are afraid of reporting because, oh, well, they'll know I did it, reporter information is confidential. Nobody in the state of Florida has access to that information except for certain department employees. So in order to know who the reporter is, it's, it would take a court order to get that information.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought.
I was going to say, as well as one thing, I have spoken with a lot of reporters who will call up and say that they got a call because they know I was the reporter, and I'm like, no, we never told them who the reporter was, but unfortunately the information that we may get may be only known to, say, and an instance I had was a brother who lived out in Washington State. His sister was calling him complaining about what was going on, and she knew the only person she told about it was her brother, and she was so upset with him. But in the end, we were able to help her to save her monies because she was being exploited, and she came around and forgave him. But it's kind of upsetting to the reporter to get that call that I told you this and you told him. And, I mean, I always say to the reporter, well, if you ever get asked about it, you could just say, well, wow, I did say something to a couple of friends about it, but I never said I never called or or admit to it, but.
Yeah.
We keep it confidential.
Well, you definitely touched base on the next question that I had for you as well, and I guess I'll just use a hypothetical, an example per se. If I had a reason to believe, small chance to believe that my neighbor down the street was a victim of abuse, I really wouldn't know what types of things I need to gather information-wise before I made that call. Can you help us understand what vital things we need and or what minimal things we need?
Sure. The more information you have, the better, obviously. But basically, if you have the victim's name, their demographic information, their phone number, their address. Also, if abuse is occurring or you believe it is occurring, you need to provide the name of the abuser. If you don't have it, that's okay. You can let them know what type of abuse is occurring. So those are basic needs that the call line would need.
Yeah.
Other information could be collateral sources. If you know neighbors that have seen this, or other individuals whose phone numbers you may or may not know, just other names that we could go to ask information.
Good point.
The more information that you know, the better it is for the investigator to get out there and really do a good investigation.
Yeah, it sounds like more information the better, so so the investigator really knows. They can look at any unturned stone per se on there as well. Now, Sherry, we didn't talk about your position with the Area Agency on Aging, but you obviously are a victim advocate too. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure, correct. With Pasco and Pinellas County, through the Area Agency on Aging, there's 2 victim advocates, me being for Pinellas, there's one for Pasco County. So for victims of crime in Pinellas and Pasco, we provide free services, and that is for victims of crime, obviously, so we can help them file for injunctions for protection, meaning if you file for an injunction for protection, we can help the individual go to court, go with them so they don't feel scared or terrified. A lot of times we can accompany a victim as well to the criminal court hearings. They don't want to see the abuser in court. Sometimes we can go to the court hearing for the elderly victim and report back to them what's going on. So we're sort of the liaison for the victim or the voice of the victim. There's also, through the Attorney General's office, there's a program called Crime Victim Compensation where they can sometimes receive funding or money compensation due to the crime that occurred to them. Let's say, you know, one of their caregivers came in, sold their TV or broke their TV due to the crime. They can sometimes receive money in regards to that crime so they could replace their TV. So those type of things. We can help the victim. Every victim has different needs, but if you are a victim of a crime in Pinellas or Pasco County, we do recommend that you call us and we can help you.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And your services are essential. John, your services are essential as well. And I am not envious at all to be in a position where I would deal with that type of situation out there. I think we talked a little bit earlier that it would be very hard for me as well. John, is there a reason why you and I are wearing some purple today?
Well, actually, June 15th is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day.
Oh, okay.
I've heard people tell me it's World Elder Abuse Day. I'm like, no, it's awareness
Right.
of the prevalence. And this is an annual event that's held, and there's recognition. So on June 15th, everyone should be wearing purple to show their acknowledgement of an understanding that we need to protect our elders.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. What day of it was June 15th, correct?
June 15th, it's a Monday.
Okay, yeah. Is there anything, we're getting close to wrapping up, anything you want to add, Sherry, to our conversation?
I think that a lot of people think this subject is taboo, but a lot of times we need to talk about these things. People need to have the knowledge and understanding of, you know, what elder abuse is and how to report.
No, you're exactly right, and I'm glad that you said that too, because I think it's common that people don't report. We obviously heard some of that today, and we hope that they do. You all have been amazing guests. You brought a lot of information to the table to share with our audience today, and we really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And for anyone, thank you. And for anyone that's watching the show today, we hope that you join us next month where we have another episode with hopefully some great, valuable information for you.
Elder abuse is always devastating, but it may not always be obvious. Isolation, coercion, and the withholding of medication are only a few of the more subtle forms of elder abuse that occur every day to thousands of our senior citizens. Please join me in the fight to end elder abuse. Our elders deserve better. Visit the website of the National Center on Elder Abuse. It's time to speak up.